The Duke of Wexmoor was slowly fading, and Verity Crane was the one who carried his tea up the great stair twice each day and watched it happen. She balanced the tray on the flat of her forearm the way her father had taught her to hold a scale, level, patient, the wrist doing the work, and she climbed. Behind her, below the green baize door, the servants' hall smelled of tallow and boiled linen. Ahead, the state landing smelled of beeswax and warm dust, and of the tea itself, which had begun, in the last fortnight, to smell wrong. She could not have said wrong to anyone. A maid did not tell the house that its Duke's tea smelled wrong, but her nose had been schooled in a chemist's back room off Cheapside since before she could read, and it told her now, plainly, that under the bergamot and the good bohea there sat a second smell, green and faintly bitter, like a leaf crushed between finger and thumb and held too long. The July heat pressed against the tall windows. Bees knocked at the glass. Somewhere down in the parterre, a gardener's shears went snick, snick, and stopped. She knocked at the chamber door with one knuckle and went in. The Duke was propped against a bank of pillows the colour of old cream, and even wasted as he was, even with the flesh gone from beneath his cheekbones and the grey at his temples that had not been there in the spring, he still filled the great bed as though the bed had been built too small. His shoulders were broad under the nightshirt. His hands, folded on the counterpane, were a working man's hands set on a duke's linen, wide across the knuckle. Still, "You may set it down, Crane," he said. His voice had thinned like the rest of him, but the old iron was under it, the way a chill is under June. "Though I confess I have grown to dread the hour it arrives. It's the physic in it, Your Grace," she said. "It sours the leaf." She set the tray on the table by the window, where the light was. "So Dr. Ambrose assures me." He turned his head against the pillow to look at her. His eyes were the one part of him the wasting had not touched, dark, level, and far too awake for a man everyone had begun to speak of in the low voice one keeps for a hard frost. "Everything sours the leaf. Of late. The physic. The season. My temper. You will have heard, below stairs, that I am not long for the summer. I don't listen to the hall, Your Grace." No, something that was almost a smile crossed him and did not stay. "No, I don't imagine you do." She busied her hands with the pot to have somewhere to put them. Steam rose off the water she poured, and with it, again, that green bitterness, threading up through the bergamot, and gone before she could be sure she had caught it. She looked at the tea caddy on the tray. Brass, with a lock, the little key kept below stairs now, on a ribbon, at the still-room door. Except the key was not kept at her still-room door any longer. It had been moved. Crane, the Duke, was watching her. "You are frowning at my tea caddy as though it had insulted your mother." Her hands went still. "Forgive me, Your Grace. Don't." He shifted higher against the pillows, and the effort of it cost him. She saw the cost cross his face and pretended, for his sake, that she had not. "It is the most interesting thing that has happened in this room in a se'ennight. Tell me, what has my caddy done?" For one breath she was on the edge of it, of saying, "The tea smells of something that has no business in tea, and the caddy is locked now, and the key is not where it was, and I do not know who moved it." But she was a still-room maid, and he was the 9th Duke of Wexmoor, and between those two facts lay a distance no honest word could cross. "Nothing, Your Grace," she said. "The brass wants polishing. That is all." He looked at her a moment longer than was comfortable. "You are a very poor liar, Crane," he said, without heat. "It is nearly your best quality." He let his head fall back. "Pour it, then, and let us both dread it together." She poured. He drank, because a duke does what his physician prescribes, and she stood by the window, with her hands folded, and her heart going like the bees at the glass, watching him swallow the green bitter thing she could not name. The door opened behind them, without a knock. "Julian," the voice was warm honey, "you are looking a very great deal better." Lord Crispin Ravenscar came into the chamber the way summer light comes into a room, filling it, flattering it, missing nothing. He was the handsomer of the two brothers, and had always been, where the Duke was hewn. Lord Crispin was drawn, with a fine, straight nose and a mouth made for the drawing rooms of half the county. He crossed to the bed and laid a hand on his brother's wasted wrist with every appearance of tenderness. "Better," the Duke said dryly. "You have a physician's eye, Crispin. Doctor, Ambrose will be jealous of it. I have a brother's eye." Lord Crispin's glance moved to the tray, to the steaming cup, to Verity, and passed over her as one passes over a chair. "Has she given you the whole pot?" Ambrose was most particular. "The full measure, morning and night, or it does no good at all." "She has been most conscientious," said the Duke. "Good girl." Lord Crispin said it to the window, not to her. "You may go." Verity dropped her curtsy and gathered the empty water jug and went, and it was only at the door, with her hand on the warm brass of the latch, that she let herself look back. Lord Crispin had picked up the little locked caddy and was turning it over in his beautiful hands, testing the lid, and he was smiling down at his fading brother with a face full of love. She got the door shut behind her before her own face could betray what it had begun, without her leave to think. The corridor was long and hot and empty. She stood in it a moment, jug against her hip, and made herself breathe. Downstairs, Mrs. Pethick found her in the still room an hour later, which was where Verity went when her hands needed a task her head could hide behind. The still room was Verity's kingdom and her comfort. Shelves of stoppered jars, bunches of drying lavender and feverfew hung from the beams. The cool of the flagstones through her shoes even in July. It smelled of the whole apothecary of an English summer, mint bruised underfoot, rosemary, the honey and dust of chamomile going over in its basket. "You've a face on you like a Friday," said the housekeeper, setting down a basket of still-room linen. Mrs. Pethick was a square, dry woman of near 60, who had buried 2 husbands and a great deal of her patience, and who addressed dukes and scullery girls in precisely the same tone. "What's put it there?" "Nothing, Mrs. Pethick." "Ah, nothing." Mrs. Pethick began to sort the linen with brisk, disbelieving hands. "It's a great deal of work, is nothing. I've watched it age 3 housemaids and a bootboy. Out with it, girl, I haven't the years to spare." Verity took down a jar and put it back without looking at it. "Who blends his Grace's tea now?" "His lordship's man." Since a fortnight past. Mrs. Pethick's hands did not slow, but her eyes came up. "Why?" And the caddies kept locked. "His lordship's orders. On account of the physic being dear and the maids being light-fingered." A dry snort, as though any girl in this house would put a doctor's muck in her own pocket. "You could not pay them to." "His lordship blends it," Verity said slowly, "with the physician's powder. And it's locked. And carried up. And no one below stairs touches it, but to hand it to me at the foot of the stair." Mrs. Pethick set down the shift she was folding. The still room seemed suddenly very quiet. Even the flies at the window went still. "Verity Crane," she said, and it was the first time in a year she had used the girl's Christian name. "What are you turning over in that clever head of yours?" "Nothing," said Verity, "that a maid is allowed to turn over." For a long moment the older woman looked at her. Outside, the shears began again in the parterre. Snick, snick, and a wood pigeon complained in the limes. Then Mrs. Pethick took up her linen and her basket and moved to the door, and paused there with her hand on the frame. "His Grace," she said, "was the finest young man in this county, before the winter took hold of him, rode to hounds like the very devil, and gave the whole of the Michaelmas rents back to the tenants the year the harvest failed, and never a word said of it above a whisper. There's not a soul under this roof would not stand between him and harm, save one, that I'll not name in a room with a window open." She looked at Verity levelly. "You mind your still room, girl. That's my advice. It's cheap, and it's the only kind I've got left to give away." And she went, and left the door ajar, and left Verity alone with the drying herbs and the question she could no longer set down. She did not mind her still room. She could not. She had been born minding exactly this, the difference one green leaf makes when it goes where it should not go. Her father had drilled it into her over a counter scoured white with lye. Know your simples, girl, for the same plant that mends a heart in a grain will stop it in a scruple. She had ground 1,000 doses at his elbow before he had gone to his rest, and she had recognized, that afternoon, standing in a duke's chamber with steam rising past her face, a smell she had smelled in her father's shop 100 times, and had never once expected to smell in a cup of good Bohea. She waited until the house had dined. She waited until Lord Crispin's manservant had gone out to the stable yard for his pipe, as he did each evening at 9, and the below-stairs passage was empty, but for the ticking of the long case clock. Then she went to the little cupboard beside the servant's door, where the tea things waited to be carried up in the morning, and she found, as she had known she would, for she had watched where the ribbon hung, the small brass key on its faded loop. Her hands did not shake. Her father would have been proud of that, at least. She unlocked the caddy on the scrubbed deal table, in the last grey light of the long summer evening, and she lifted the lid, and she bent her nose to it. There it was, unmistakable now, with no bergamot to hide behind, no steam to carry it off, the flat green bitterness of a leaf she could have named Blindfold. She wetted the tip of her little finger and touched it to the blend, and set it to her tongue, the smallest grain, the way her father had taught her to taste a thing that might not be safe to taste, and the bitterness bloomed, and the faint numbness followed it across her lip, and she knew. Not tea dust, not the doctor's honest powder, dried and crumbled fine, and folded through the good leaf so cleverly that only a chemist's daughter would ever catch it. Foxglove. The purple bells that nodded all along the Wexmoor hedgerows this very month, that any child was told to leave be. A pinch to steady a labouring heart. A little more, day upon patient day, to weary that same heart past all mending, slowly, mildly, in a way no country physician would ever think to question. So that a strong young man might simply, gently, over a summer fade, someone was folding it into the Duke's tea by the spoonful. Someone with a key. Someone who came each morning to lay a loving hand upon his brother's wrist and murmur that he was looking very much better. Verity stood alone in the cooling still room with the open caddy before her, and the taste of it numbing her tongue, and understood, with a cold that had nothing to do with the summer dusk, that she now knew a thing she could never again not know, and that there was not one soul beneath the whole vast roof of Wexmoor Hall she dared to tell it to. Above her, 3 floors up, a bell rang. The Duke's bell. His nightly cup, wanting carrying up. She looked at the caddy. She looked at the key in her palm, warm from her own grip. And she began, very carefully, to think. There was a way to do a wrong thing rightly, her father had used to say, and a way to do a right thing so clumsily that it became a wrong. She stood over the open brass box in the dusk grey still room and turned the whole of it over the way she would have weighed a doubtful powder. Grain against grain, consequence against consequence. If she carried up the tainted cup, she gave the poison another day's work. If she carried up no cup at all, his lordship's man would ask why, and the asking would turn on her, and she would find herself past the gates by breakfast with a character no house would honour. And if she carried up a cup of her own honest leaf and said nothing, that was a thing a still-room maid could do, quietly, with her own 2 hands, and no one the wiser. She wetted the cloth from the water butt and wiped her tongue of the last numb bloom of it. Then she worked quickly, in the failing light, because the bell would not wait, and a duke's patience for a cold cup was a short and expensive thing. She did not touch the tainted blend again, but to close and lock it, and hang the little key back on its faded loop exactly as she had found it. The knot of the ribbon turned the same way. From her own shelf she took down good clean Bohea that had never met a doctor's hand, and she brewed it strong and true in her own small pot, and she carried it up on the tray in the tainted cup, so that the cup, at least, would tell no tales. Her heart went the whole climb like a hammer on tin. On the state landing the beeswax and warm dust smell folded round her. And this time, there was no green bitterness threading through it, Only tea. Only honest tea, and she found her eyes stung with the plainness of it. She knocked with one knuckle and went in. The candle was lit at his bedside and had burned down a finger's width, and the Duke lay watching the door as though he had been watching it some while. "You are late, Crane," he said. "I had begun to compose your epitaph. She died carrying tea," it said. "It wanted work." "I'd not have that on a stone, Your Grace," she said, and set the tray in the pool of candlelight. "My father would rise up and correct the spelling." Something moved in the dark of his eyes. "Your father was a lettered man?" "A chemist, Your Grace. Off Cheapside." She poured, and the steam came up clean between them, and she watched him without seeming to. He held that a man's trade should be written plain, or not at all. A chemist. The Duke considered her over the rim of the cup, and did not yet drink. "That accounts for the way you look at my tea caddy, as though it were a patient you did not trust to tell you its symptoms." He lifted the cup, and she had to hold her hands very still against her apron. "You have a chemist's eye, Crane, and a chemist's silences. I have begun to collect your silences. I have very little else to collect these days. I hope Your Grace collects something dearer soon. So do I." He drank. She had thought she was prepared for it, and she was not. She had brewed the cup herself, clean. With her own leaf, she knew to the grain what was and was not in it. And still, when he swallowed, some animal part of her braced as though she had handed him the other thing. She made herself breathe. The candle guttered in a draught the great house never quite kept out even in July, and the wax ran, and the Duke drank his honest tea, and did not know it was the first honest cup he had been given in a fortnight. "It is better tonight," he said. Surprised, he looked into the cup. "It is, a great deal better. The souring is gone off it. The leaf was fresher, Your Grace," she said. It was true, as far as it went. Her father had taught her that as well, that a lie you never have to unsay is best built on the frame of a truth. "Fresher," he turned the word over. "You will think me a fanciful invalid, Crane, but I have lain here 3 weeks watching the strength go out of my own arms, like water out of a cracked jug, and I have thought, more than once in the small hours, that I was being emptied on a schedule, that there was a hand on the tap." His dark eyes came up to hers, and they were far too awake, and she felt the whole cold weight of what she knew press up against the back of her teeth. "You will tell me that is the fever talking." "I'll not tell Your Grace what he thinks," she said carefully. "I've not the schooling for it. No." He set the cup down. His wide, still hand rested a moment on the counterpane, and she saw the tremor in it that had not been there in the spring, and she looked away, because it was not a thing a man like him would wish watched. "You have not the schooling for a great many things, Crane, and yet I notice you contrive to know them. Go to bed. You have a stair to climb again at dawn, and I have a night of listening to this house creak to look forward to. We each have our labours," she curtsied. At the door his voice caught her. "Crane, the cup. Whatever you did to it, do it again." "Yes, Your Grace," she said, and got herself out into the hot, dark corridor, and stood there with her back against the panelling and her hand pressed flat over her own galloping heart, and understood that she had made herself a partner to a secret with the Duke, who did not yet know he had one. She slept badly and rose before the maids, and it was in the grey of that next dawn, coming down the back stair with the emptied jug, that the trouble she had set walking came round to meet her. Lord Crispin's man was in the below-stairs passage. He was called Sefton, and he was a narrow, quiet person, with a valet's soft tread and a gaze that took inventory. He had the tea cupboard open. He had the caddy in his 2 hands, and he had the little brass key, and he was turning the key in the lock and then turning it back, testing, and his head came round as her foot found the flag, and for a moment they simply looked at one another in the thin light, with the whole silent house asleep above them. "You're early, Crane," said Sefton. "The still room wants me early in the heat, Miss Sefton. The herbs go over if they're cut late." "Do they?" He did not put the caddy down. His thumb moved on the lid of it, the way a man's thumb moves on a thing he is thinking about. His lordship likes the tea kept just so, the measure exact. He blends it himself. Of an evening, you'll know that. I'll know it now, Mr. Sefton. He was down here last night. Sefton watched her over the brass, after the household had gone up. Blending, and he says to me this morning, Sefton, the caddy's been at. The ribbon's turned wrong. Someone's had it open. The soft voice did not rise at all, and that was worse than if it had. Now who'd want the Duke's physic, do you suppose? Dear as it is, her father's hands did not shake, and neither did hers, though the whole of her had gone cold as the flags. I couldn't say, Mist Sefton. I only carry it. I've never a reason to open it. The cup's made up before it reaches me. So it is. He studied her a long moment more. Somewhere above a floorboard settled, a bird began, tentative, in the limes beyond the area window. So it is. You carry it. You don't blend it. You don't open it. You don't taste it. He set the caddy down at last, and something in the setting down was a warning laid on the deal table between them. See you keep to that. A girl that starts taking an interest in what's above her station, a doctor's business, a gentleman's household, she generally finds the interest don't pay. It costs. You follow me. I follow you, Mr. Sefton. Good girl. He said it the way his master said it, to the air near her, not to her, and he took himself up the stair with his soft valet's tread, and left her standing over the closed brass box with the sweat cold on her back, and the certain knowledge that the household above her was no longer merely dangerous to the Duke. It had begun, since the turn of a ribbon, to be dangerous to her. She did not go to Mrs. Pethick. Mrs. Pethick had told her, in a room with a window open, that there was one soul under the roof who would not stand between the Duke and harm, and would not name him, and Verity had understood the not naming for what it was, not ignorance, but fear, the old dry fear of a woman with 30 years' place to lose, and nowhere on earth to go if she lost it. To carry the thing to Mrs. Pethick was to make the housekeeper choose between her conscience and her bread, and Verity would not do that to her. Nor to the butler, Miss Harrow, who dined at Lord Crispin's word and poured Lord Crispin's wine. Nor to Dr. Ambrose, who came twice a week in his gig and pronounced the Duke sinking and prescribed the very powder that his lordship's beautiful hands folded into the leaf. For the powder, she now believed, was likely honest, a genuine cordial for a labouring heart, and the poison had been married to it so that the one should mask and excuse the other. Ambrose was either in it to the neck or a fool, and she could not tell which, and a girl in her place could not afford to guess wrong about a gentleman. There was no one. That was the plain arithmetic of it. There was no one in all the counties she could carry it to who would not, in carrying it further, deliver her up. Except the one man it was being done to. And he was a duke, and she was a still-room maid, and he had drunk clean tea for one single night, and thought it merely fresher leaf. The days went green and hot. The hay was got in the home meadows, and the whole park smelled of it, drying sweet, drifting in at the tall open windows. The roses on the south front blew full and began, at their edges, to brown. And Verity Crane did the only thing she could see to do, which was to go on making up the Duke's cups with her own clean hand and her own clean leaf, and to keep the tainted blend she had folded away in a twist of paper hidden behind the loose stone at the back of her still-room hearth, proof, if ever she found a soul on earth, with the power and the will to be shown it. And the Duke of Wexmoor, drinking honest tea twice a day for the first time in a fortnight, began, slowly, mildly, in a way no country physician would think to question, to mend. It was the mending that undid her caution. She had not thought it through. She had thought only of the poison, of stopping the tap, and she had not reckoned that a man drawing back from the edge is as visible a thing as a man going over it. By the 4th day he had the colour of living in his face again. By the 6th he sat up unaided, and called for the newspaper, and quarrelled with his valet about being shaved. On the 7th, climbing to him at the dinner hour, she heard voices through the chamber door before ever she knocked, and she stopped on the landing with the tray on her forearm and the hay smell in her nose, and she listened, because a still-room maid who has hidden poison behind her hearthstone has already given up the luxury of not listening. "Remarkable, Doctor," Ambrose was saying, in the plummy, pleased tone of a man taking credit. "Truly remarkable, my lord. I confess I had not looked for it. The heart has steadied wonderfully this last week. I begin to have real hopes. Do you?" Lord Crispin's warm honey had gone very slightly flat. "You had told me, Ambrose, that we must be prepared. You had used the word prepared to me a fortnight since, in this very room. And so we must. Prudence always. But the Constitution is a marvellous engine, my lord, and his Grace's was ever a strong one. Something has agreed with him. The season, perhaps. The warmth. I shall not quarrel with Providence when it turns my patient's way. No." A pause, and in the pause Verity heard, quite clearly, the small china sound of a cup being set into a saucer with great care. "No. One must never quarrel with Providence. Thank you, Ambrose. You will send more of the powder. The full measure. He is not out of the wood, whatever his color tells you. I know my brother's constitution better than his heart does. We will not slacken his physic on a week's fair weather." She was down the landing and into the window embrasure with the tray before the door opened, folded into the shadow of the great curtain the way a girl learns to fold herself, who has grown up small in a small shop, and Dr. Ambrose bustled out pink and satisfied, and behind him, in the doorway, Lord Crispin stood a moment looking after him, and the beautiful face had nothing in it at all. Not love, not grief. It was the face a man makes over a sum that has not come out, and is working out where the error lies, and means to find it. Then he turned and went the other way toward his own apartments, and Verity stood in the hot folds of the curtain with the tray on her arm, and understood two new things at once: that he would not slacken the physic, meaning he would send Sefton down to blend it stronger, to catch up the schedule his brother's recovery had spoilt, and that the recovery itself, which was her doing, which was the one good thing her clean cups had bought, had become the very evidence that would drive him to press harder. She had thought to save the Duke by quietly emptying the poison out of his days, and instead she had shown the hand on the tap that the tap was being interfered with, and taught it to bear down. She went in and served him. He was propped high and nearly cheerful, the newspaper across his knees, and he greeted her with, "Crane, my Gowler physician tells me I am a marvellous engine. I have been called a great many things, but never yet an engine. Do I look to you like an engine?" "You look better, Your Grace," she said, and heard her own voice come out wrong, too tight, too near the bone. He heard it too. He set down the paper. "Crane, your tea. Your Grace. Crane, look at me." She poured instead, and her hand was not perfectly steady, and one bright drop went over the lip of the cup onto the tray, and they both looked at it, the small dark bead of it on the silver. And then he did a thing no Duke had ever done to her in her life. He reached out his wide, mending hand, and closed it, quite lightly, over her wrist, over the little bones her father had taught her to keep level, and he held her still. "You are frightened," he said. It was not a question. His hand was warm, and it was steadier than it had been in a week, and she could feel her own pulse going against his palm, quick and small. And she thought, wildly, out of nowhere, of a bird held in the hand, not to be crushed, but to be kept from beating itself against the glass. "You have been frightened for days, and you have carried it up my stair twice a day and set it down, and told me the leaf was fresher. I am not the fool this house takes me for, Crane, though I have lately been too weak to prove it. Something is wrong under my own roof, and you know what it is." The whole of it rose in her, the caddy, the key, the green bitter numbing bloom, Sefton's soft it costs, the twist of paper behind her hearthstone, his brother's face doing sums in the doorway. It rose to the very edge of her, and she looked down at his hand on her wrist, a working man's hand on a duke's linen, and at the vast, unbridgeable distance that his ring and her apron made between the two of them. And she was so tired, and she wanted so badly to set the weight down into a pair of hands stronger than her own, that for one whole breath she nearly did it. Then the door opened without a knock. Julian, warm honey, filling the room. You are looking a very great deal better. Lord Crispin's glance went to his brother's hand on the maid's wrist, and stopped there, and the smile did not falter by so much as a hair, and that unfaltering was the most frightening thing Verity had ever seen a beautiful face do. The Duke did not release her at once. He let his hand fall from her wrist in its own time, unhurried, a man setting down a thing because he has chosen to, and not because he has been come upon. And she understood that he had done it slowly on purpose, for her sake, so that it should look like nothing. Crispin, he said, you have a gift for doorways. You are forever framed in one, and you have a gift for alarming your servants. Lord Crispin came in on his light drawing-room feet, and his eyes moved over Verity once. Top to him, taking inventory the way his man took it. The girl looks white as a sheet. What have you been saying to her? I was thanking her, said the Duke, for a fortnight's careful nursing. It seems a thing worth thanking her for. I am, by Ambrose's account, a marvelous engine. So I hear. It is the best of news. Lord Crispin picked up the caddy from the tray, the everyday gesture, the fond brother's small fussing, and turned it in his hands, and his gaze came to rest on Verity, and stayed. You may go, Crane. His Grace tires himself with talking, and you have your work. She curtsied. She got as far as the door. Crane, Lord Crispin's voice, gentle as a hand on a horse's neck. She stopped. She turned. He was smiling at her over the brass box, and the caddy was open in his fingers, the lid up, and he was looking down into it, and then up at her. Down, and then up. And she knew with a lurch of her whole stomach that he had counted the leaf, that a man who bears down on a schedule knows to the spoonful what he last left in the box, and that the box was not as full as his own hand had left it. Yes, my lord, she said. How long have you been in this house? A year come Michaelmas, my lord. A year. He closed the caddy. He did not lock it. He held the little key loose in his palm, and did not lock it, and let her see him not lock it, and the not locking was a sentence spoken in a language they both now understood. You have the look of a Cheapside girl. A chemist's shop, I should have said. Was I right? The floor seemed to tilt under her. She had never told him. She had told the Duke, 3 floors up, in candlelight, with the door shut. She had told Mrs. Pethick, once in the still room, with the door ajar and the shears going in the parterre. And here it was in his mouth, her father's trade, laid out on the counterpane between them like a card turned face up. And she understood that the house had ears she had not counted, and that everything she had said in a year of thinking herself invisible had been going, all this while, up some quiet channel to this beautiful, some-working man. My father kept a shop, my lord, she said. He's at his rest these 3 years. A chemist's daughter. Lord Crispin said it softly, tasting it. And behind him she saw the Duke go very still against his pillows, saw the dark, awake eyes move from his brother's face to hers, and back, saw a man who had been called an engine begin, silently, in the space of 3 heartbeats, to understand the machine he was lying inside of. How very interesting. One would think the good Lord fashioned you for a still room, Crane. All those little jars. All that knowing what is in a thing by the smell of it. He smiled, and turned the caddy once more in his hands. Fond, fond. It is a rare gift. I should hate to see it wasted. Go on, now, off you go. She went. She got the door shut behind her, and the long, hot corridor took her, and she walked its length on legs that did not feel like her own, past the tall windows, and the drifting hay smell, and the bees still knocking somewhere at the glass, and she did not let herself run. Because a running maid is a guilty maid, and the house was watching now. The house had always been watching. Only when she reached the turn of the back stair, out of sight of every door, did she put her shoulder to the cool plaster wall and stand there with her eyes shut and her father's voice going in her. The same plant that mends a heart in a grain will stop it in a scruple. Know your simples. Girl, he knew. Lord Crispin knew that she knew. He had counted the leaf and named her father's trade, and left the caddy pointedly unlocked. And every one of those was a message. And the message was, I see you, chemist's daughter, and I am not troubled, because you are a year Michaelmas still room girl, with a rest quiet father and no soul on earth to run to, and I hold this house in my beautiful hand. And above her, 3 floors up, behind a shut chamber door, the Duke of Wexmoor lay mending on her clean cups, and doing the terrible sum at last himself, and there was no way now to unshow him the answer, and no way to reach him that did not run through his brother's watching, and somewhere below her in the blue summer dark Sefton would be taking down the caddy to blend the next cup stronger, to bear down, to catch up the schedule that a still room maid had dared to spoil. She pushed herself off the wall. Her hands, she found, had steadied. They always did. In the end, it was the one inheritance her father had left her that no house could turn out of doors. She had until the dinner hour tomorrow to find a way to keep a duke from drinking a stronger cup, under the eye of a man who now knew exactly what she was, and exactly how alone. The bell above her rang. Not the Duke's. This time. The other, Lord Crispin's bell, ringing down into the servants' passage, calling someone up. She stood at the foot of the stair and listened to it ring, and understood that it was ringing for her. The bell went on ringing, thin and silver down the passage, and Verity set the emptied jug on the deal table, and smoothed her apron twice, with damp palms, and went up. Not the great stair this time. Lord Crispin's apartments lay along the east front, and the servants' way to them was a mean twist of dark treads that let out through a jib door papered to match the wall, so that a maid seemed to step out of the plaster itself. She came out of it into a corridor that smelled nothing like her duke's. Where Julian's landing was beeswax and warm dust, this was scent, a gentleman's scent, sandalwood and bitter orange and something civet sweet beneath, laid on thick enough to walk through. The evening sun came low and red down the length of it, and lay in long bars across the turkey carpet, and the heat of the day was still shut up in the walls, and had nowhere to go. Sefton opened the door before she knocked. He must have been standing at it. In you come, he said softly, and stood aside no more than he had to, so that she went by close enough to smell the pipe smoke in his coat. Lord Crispin was at his ease in a wing chair by the open window, with a glass of something amber at his elbow, and a book face down across the arm, and he did not rise, and he did not look round at once. He was watching the parterre below, where the last of the light was going off the clipped box, and a gardener's boy was drawing a long hose across the gravel to water the roots against the drought. The room was cool by contrast, north-shaded, and it smelled of him, and of ink, and of cut lilies going brown at the lip in a Chinese jar. You keep good hours, Crane, he said to the window. My brother's marvelous engine. I have been hearing a great deal about you this evening. My lord. Sit, he gestured, without looking, at a small hard chair set out in the middle of the carpet, plainly set out before she came. She did not sit. He turned his head then, and smiled to find her standing, and let the not sitting pass. No, you would rather stand. A still-room girl on her feet. Very well. He lifted the amber glass and turned it in the red light so it threw a coin of gold onto his own wrist. Tell me, how do you find his grace? Better, my lord. As Dr. Ambrose says. As Dr. Ambrose says. He tasted the words the way he had tasted her father's trade, holding them a moment. Doctor, Ambrose is a very hopeful man. I am a more careful one. I have watched my brother go down and down since the spring, Crane, by inches, like a candle a drought keeps guttering, and I have learned not to trust a week of colour in his cheek. The heart is a treacherous organ. It flatters us. It rallies, and we rejoice. And then, he snapped his fingers. Once, a small dry crack in the still room. The flattery is done. She said nothing. The gardener's boy dragged the hose, and the water came on below with a hiss she could hear through the glass. "You have grown fond of him," Lord Crispin said. It was not a question either. None of them ever asked her anything. They told her what she was. It is natural. He is easy to grow fond of. He was always the one they were fond of. Something moved under the honey, quick, and was smoothed over. "I am going to do you a kindness, Crane. You have carried that tray up and down my brother's stair twice a day for a fortnight, and it has worn you. I can see it has worn you. You are white as whey, and it is not fit work for a girl with a gift for the still room. From tomorrow, Sefton will carry his grace his tea. You will keep to your herbs, where you are wanted." The floor did not tilt this time. She had learned, in a single day, to stand on floors that tilted. But something cold went down the whole length of her, because she saw it entire in the one breath. The hand on the tap had found the interference, and it had not accused her, and it had not turned her off. It had simply, gently, taken the cup out of her hands. "You are very good, my lord," she said. "But I'd not like his grace to think I'd been found wanting. He will think what I tell him to think," said pleasantly, into the amber glass. "He is fond of you. I have just seen how fond. It will not do, Crane, for a duke to be fond of his still-room maid. You understand me. It does the girl no good. Girls are turned off for less and go to worse. I am sparing you that." He set the glass down with a small click. "You will hand the tray to Sefton at the foot of the stair, made up as always, and you will go to your herbs, and in a month, when this is all one way or the other, you will thank me. Sefton, see her down." "My lord," said Verity, and curtsied, and Sefton's soft tread came up behind her, and she went out through the jib door, into the dark treads and the smell of plaster, and stood in the pitch of the servants' stair with her hand on the rope, and understood that she had lost. Not the argument. The Duke. From tomorrow the poison went up in Sefton's hands, blended stronger by his lordship's own beautiful fingers to catch the schedule up, and there was not one thing a still-room girl could do to stop the cup at the foot of the stair. Below, in the passage, the long case clock struck the 9:30, and the sound of it went through her like water through a cracked jug. She did not sleep. She lay in her narrow bed under the eaves, where the day's heat had climbed, and sat, and listened to the house tick and settle, and turned it over and over. The window of the maid's garret stood open on the hot dark, and let in the smell of the drying hay off the home meadows, sweet as a lie, and a barn owl going over the stable roof, and once, far off, the church clock at Wexmoor Magna telling the hours she could not sleep through. Beside her, Suki the under-housemaid breathed slow and easy, a girl with nothing behind her hearthstone. There was the twist of paper. That was all she had. The green, crumbled proof of it, folded small behind the loose stone at the back of the still-room fire, and no soul on earth with the power and the will to be shown it, save the one man 3 floors down, who was being emptied on a schedule, and who now, she believed, knew it. He had held her wrist. He had said there is a hand on the tap. He was not a fool. He had watched his brother's face do sums in the doorway, same as she had. And a duke, even a wasted one, was not without weapons. He could send for his own physician out of London. He could send for his man of business, his friends, a magistrate who was his own equal, and not his brother's dinner guest. He could do, in a word, all the 1,000 things a still-room maid could not, if only he could be got the truth, whole, and got it out of reach of the ears that had already carried her father's trade up the quiet channel to Lord Crispin's chair. She could not reach him by day. By day, the house watched. But she carried his morning tea still. One more morning, at least, before Sefton took even that, and a girl who has hidden poison behind her hearth has already given up the luxury of being careful. She rose before the grey, while Suki still slept, and went down barefoot on the cold treads, with her shoes in her hand, and in the still room she did 3 things by the light of one dip. She drew off the loose hearthstone and took the twist of paper into her apron. She sat at the deal table and, in her father's small clear chemist's hand, wrote out on a half-sheet everything she knew and how she knew it. The smell, the numbness on her tongue, the caddy, the key, the locking, the leaf counted. Plain and dated as her father had taught her to write a thing, plain or not at all, and folded the half-sheet round the twist of green so that the word and the proof were one. And she brewed a last clean pot of good bohea in her own small teapot and made up the tray. Her heart went the whole climb like a hammer on tin. The house was not yet woke. On the state landing the early light came grey gold through the tall windows, and the beeswax smell folded round her, and there was no green bitterness in it. None, only tea and dust and morning. And she knocked with one knuckle and went in. The Duke was awake. Of course he was awake. A man who lies listening to his house creak sleeps when the house does. He was sitting up against the cream pillows, with the grey coming into the room across him, and the colour of living was in his face now. Real, a week's worth of it. And his dark eyes came to the door, and to her, and to the tray, and something in him that had been braced went quiet. "Crane," he said, "you are early. Have you come to poison me, or to save me? I find I can no longer tell my mornings apart." Her hands did not shake. "The second, Your Grace," she said, "while I'm let." He was very still. "Set it down." She set the tray in the grey light and did not pour. Instead, she took the folded half-sheet from her apron, the twist of green inside it, and she stood holding it a moment on the flat of her palm the way she would have held a scale. And then she laid it on the counterpane beside his wide, still, mending hand, and stepped back to the length of the room. "I've been told off the tray, Your Grace," she said. "From today Mr. Sefton carries it. I'll not be let near your cup again. So I'll say it once, plain, and then I'll say I never did. And you may believe the paper, or believe me, but I'll not be able to say it twice." She drew her breath. "The tea's been physicked with more than the doctor's powder this fortnight past. There's foxglove folded through the leaf, the purple bells off your own hedges, dried fine and married to the cordials so the one hides the other. A grain steadies a labouring heart. A little more, day on day, wearies it past all mending, slow and mild, so no country doctor thinks to ask. I've smelled it since June. I've tasted it. That paper's the proof of it. Out of the caddy that's kept locked now, with the key moved where I'll not say I found it. And it's your own blood folds it in, Your Grace, of an evening, with his own hands, and comes in the morning to lay them on your wrist." The grey light lay across him, and he did not move, and he did not speak, and outside a wood pigeon began in the limes, that soft rolling complaint, on, and she stood at the length of the room with her hands folded, and her whole life laid out on a duke's counterpane, and waited to be believed or turned off. He picked up the paper. He unfolded it with fingers that were steadier than they had been in a week, and the green twist of it lay open on his palm, and he bent his head, his own head, the Duke of Wexmoor's own head, and smelled it once, the way she had smelled it, and she saw his nostrils narrow at the flat green bitterness of the thing, and she saw him know it for true, not because a maid had said so, but because it was there, on his own hand, under his own roof, in his own morning. "Crispin," he said, not to her, to the room, to the counterpane, to the green leaf on his palm. Just the name, laid down like the last card. And then, very low, in a voice she had not heard from him, the iron all bare of the June under it, "I gave him the run of the estate. I gave him money when he asked, and did not ask what for. I stood godfather over his debts 3 times, and never once." He stopped. His hand closed on the paper, not crushing it, careful, a chemist's care. And she saw the cost of the closing cross his face, and did not pretend, this time, that she had not. "How long have you known?" "Since June, Your Grace. For certain, 7 nights past. It's my clean leaf you've mended on. Your clean leaf. He looked at her across the grey room, and there was a thing in the dark awake eyes that she had no name for and no right to. You have been quietly saving my life with a teapot for a serenite, Crane, at the risk of your own, and letting me thank you for fresher leaf. There wasn't a soul I could carry it to, she said, that wouldn't carry me on to him. I did the only thing my two hands could do. Yes, he said it slowly. Yes, I begin to see the shape of your week. You have been very alone in it. He set the paper down flat on the counterpane and laid his wide hand over it, covering it, and for a moment he was only a man in a grey dawn who had learnt who his brother was, and she looked away, out of the tall window, to give him the moment, because it was not a thing a man like him would wish watched. The wood pigeon rolled on. Below, a door went, and a pail rang on stone, and the house began, faintly, to wake. Listen to me, the Duke said, and the iron was back and level. You will pour that pot now, and I will drink it, because Sefton will ask you at the foot of the stair whether I drank, and you will say I did. You will hand him his tray tonight made up just as ever, and you will go to your herbs, and you will do nothing, Crane, that a watched girl would not do. Can you do that? Can you be small one day more? I've been small a year, Your Grace. I can manage a day. The ghost of the old dry thing crossed him. I don't believe you were ever small a moment in your life. You are the least small person under this roof, and you have been carrying it up my stairs in an apron. He drew breath, and it cost him less than it had a week since, and that was her doing, and she held to it. There is a man. Sir Aldous Frayne, at Frayne Court, 6 miles east on the Magna Road. He sat the bench with my father. He does not dine with my brother, and he does not owe my brother a farthing, and he would take the word of a chemist's daughter over the word of half the peerage. For he is that rare and inconvenient thing, an honest magistrate. If a letter in my own hand and that paper could be got to Frayne Court, quietly, off this estate, in a way no one here would think to watch. There's the carrier's cart. Your Grace, she said, low and quick, because the house was waking under them and the minutes were short. Wednesdays, it stops at the lodge gate for the kitchen's order and goes on east through the Magna. Old Tranter drives it. He's no love for the hall, since his lordship's dogs had his ewe. He'd carry a parcel and say nothing, for a shilling and a spite. The Duke looked at her a long moment in the strengthening light. You have thought about how a thing gets off this estate unseen. I think about a great many things, Your Grace, that a maid's not allowed to. So I am learning. He was already reaching for the writing slope on the bedside table, the one Ambrose let him have to sign what wanted signing. Pour my tea, Crane, then go down and be small, and come to me tonight when you fetch the empty tray, and I will have a letter. Tomorrow is Tuesday. Wednesday the cart comes. He looked up at her, and the whole of the ruined summer was in it, and the whole of the mending too. We have 2 days to keep a secret in a house that has already learned my brother's every one of yours. She poured. He drank his clean, honest tea, and she watched him take it, and this time there was no bracing in her. Only a thing she was afraid to look at directly, the way you do not look at the sun off water. She gathered the pot. At the door she stopped, because she could not help it. Your Grace, if I'm found with that paper before the cart comes, you will not be found with it. I have it now. He slid the twist of green under his own pillow, under the Duke of Wexmoor's own head, where no hand in the house would dare to go. If it is found anywhere, it is found on me, and I am past the reach of being turned off. Go. She went, and for the whole of that Tuesday she was small. She was small over the drying baskets in the heat, cutting feverfew before the sun could draw its oils, small at the servants' dinner, with her eyes on her plate, while Mr. Harrow said grace in Lord Crispin's phrasing, small at the foot of the great stair at the dinner hour, handing up the made-up tray to Sefton's soft receiving hands and saying, His Grace took his morning cup, Mr. Sefton, and said the leaf was good, in a flat maid's voice, and watching Sefton carry the poison up in her stead, and being able to do nothing. Nothing, because there was a plan now, and the plan wanted her small. It near broke her, the handing up. She had emptied the tap for 7 nights with her own hands, and now she stood at the foot of the stair and gave the stronger cup back into the schedule, and told herself it was 1 cup. 1. And a man a week mended could bear 1 cup, while a letter went east in a carrier's cart. She told herself that over the drying baskets all afternoon, 1 cup, and did not believe it, and went on being small. Mrs. Pethick found her at the dusk, wringing out cloths at the still-room butt, though the cloths were wrung already. "You've that face again," the housekeeper said. She shut the door. She had never shut the door before. Worse than a Friday. "What have you gone and done, girl?" "Nothing, Mrs. Pethick. Verity, the Christian name, the 2nd time in a week." The square dry face was not dry now. It was frightened, and trying not to be. Sefton's been below all afternoon. In the passage. In the still-room passage. He'd no call to be there. His master's teas blended of an evening, not an afternoon. And he was walking it slow with his hands behind him, looking at doors. Looking at your door. She gripped the edge of the table. "What's behind your door that Sefton wants to look at?" Verity's hands went still in the grey water. The hearthstone. The loose stone at the back of the fire, that she had drawn off before dawn and set back. Set back, but had she set it true? Had she pressed it flush, in the dark, with the dip guttering and her heart going? Or had she left it a hair proud, a hair off? The kind of hair a still valet's inventory eye would catch on the 3rd slow pass. "There's nothing behind my door but herbs," she said, and heard her own voice come out wrong. Mrs. Pethick looked at her a long, long moment. Then she did a thing that undid Verity worse than any warning. She reached out and put her rough old hand flat against the girl's cheek, brief, the way a mother might, the way no one had touched Verity's face since her father went to his rest. "I buried 2 good men, and stood by while this house buried a great one it doesn't yet know it's burying," Mrs. Pethick said, very low. "I've 30 years' place and nowhere on God's earth to go if I lose it, and I've been a coward with it, and I'll likely go on being one, because that's what 30 years and no pension makes of a woman. But I'll tell you this for nothing, Verity Crane, and then I'll not have said it. Whatever's behind your door, if it's a thing that could save him, you get it out of this house tonight. Tonight, not tomorrow. Because Sefton doesn't walk a passage slow for his health, and his master doesn't wait on a thing once he's decided where it lies." The butt water dripped. Somewhere above, faint, the dinner hour bell. "I can't tonight," Verity whispered. "It's promised safe already, in a place they'll not go. It only wants till Wednesday." "Wednesday?" Mrs. Pethick's hand fell from her cheek. "Girl, you've not got till Wednesday. You've got till Sefton fetches a candle and a reason." She straightened, and the dry came back over her like a shutter, and she took up her keys. "I've said nothing. Remember that I said nothing. It's all I've got left to keep." And she went out, and left the door, this time wide. Verity stood over the grey water, with her heart going, and thought, the paper is under the Duke's own pillow, safe, past their reach. There is nothing behind my door but the empty gap where it lay. Let Sefton look. Let him draw off the stone and find a cold hollow and dust. There is nothing there to find. And then, cold as the flags through her shoes, a second thought came up under the first the way the green bitterness came up under the bergamot. Nothing there to find but the hollow itself. The hollow, and a swept clean stone lately moved. A gap behind a maid's hearth, worn to the shape of a hidden thing. It would prove nothing to a magistrate. But it would prove everything to Lord Crispin, that his still-room girl had a hiding place, and had lately used it, and had lately emptied it. It would tell him the proof was up and walking. It would tell him he had run out of time to be gentle. She did not go to the still-room fire. That was the thing they wanted her to do, to run to it, to check it, to be seen at it. She made herself walk the other way, up to the empty tray at the Duke's dinner hour. Small, small. One more time. But the Duke's tray, when she came for it, was not given down to her by the Duke. Sefton was on the state landing, at the chamber door, with the tray already in his own 2 hands and the cloth already over it, and behind him the door stood open on the candlelit room, and inside the room, standing over his brother's bed with a folded paper open in his beautiful fingers, was Lord Crispin Ravenscar. And the paper in his hand was a half-sheet. And on the half-sheet, even at the length of the landing, even in candlelight, she could see the small clear chemist's hand, her father's hand, the plain or not at all hand, and the green twist of it lying spilled across the counterpane where it had been shaken out. Under the pillow. He had gone under the Duke's own pillow, under the Duke's own head, the one place in all the house she had sworn to herself no hand would dare, because it was his brother's, and a brother dares. "Crane," said Lord Crispin, without looking up from the paper, in the warm honey voice, in the flat, pleased voice of a man whose sum has at last come out. "Come in. We were speaking of you." The whole world went very slow and very loud. The candle flames stood up straight. She heard the wood pigeon still going somewhere in the summer dark, and Sefton's soft breath at her shoulder, and her own blood in her ears, and she came in across the threshold because there was nothing else her feet could do, and the Duke's eyes met hers across the room, awake, dark, level, and full of a thing that was not fear for himself. "My brother," said Lord Crispin, "has had a most distressing evening. He has taken it into his poor rallied head that someone has been physicking his tea. With foxglove, if you please. Out of the hedges." He turned the half-sheet in the candlelight, admiring it, and here is the proof of it, in a chemist's fair hand, dated and reasoned like a shop bill. Such a clever paper, such a knowing paper. Now who, in all this house? And now he looked up, and the beautiful face was smiling, and the smile was the most frightening thing she had ever seen it do. Who in all this house, Crane, has a chemist's hand, and a chemist's nose, and a chemist's shop, 3 years at his rest, and a hollow scraped clean behind her still-room hearth the very shape of this wicked little parcel. Sefton found the hollow an hour since, empty, lately emptied. As though the guilty article had just been, moved, carried up, say, tucked somewhere soft and high. He let the paper fall to the counterpane. "It is a terrible thing, Julian, but it must be faced. Your still-room maid, your cheapside chemist's girl, has been poisoning your tea, and grew frightened when you rallied, and hid her proofs, and when they were like to be found, ran to hide them in the one place she thought a gentleman would never search, under a sick man's pillow. Sir Aldous Frayne sits the bench Thursday. I have already sent to say we shall have business for him." "That is a lie," said the Duke, very quietly. "And you know to the grain that it is a lie, Crispin, because it is your own hand folds the leaf." "It is my word," said Lord Crispin, gently, against a poisoner's. "And I am the Duke of Wexmoor's brother." He smoothed his cuff. "You will forgive the phrasing. The Duke of Wexmoor's heir, should this sad decline resume its course, as, my poor Julian, I very much fear it now will." He nodded to Sefton. "Lock her in the still room. She knows its locks. Let them keep her a night. Thursday she goes to the magistrate, and this house has its explanation, and its grief, all tied in one girl's apron." The smile did not falter by a hair. "Take her down." Sefton's soft hand closed on Verity's arm, and the Duke came up off his pillows with a strength a week of clean cups had brought him, saying, "You will not lay a hand on her." And Lord Crispin turned to his brother, with the open pleasure of a man who has waited a long time for exactly this. And Verity, in the doorway, in Sefton's grip, with the whole trap sprung shut around her, and the letter to Frayne Court not written, and the cart not come, and Thursday's bench already sent for, understood that the point had come at last, where being small could save no one, and drew the breath to stop being small. The breath filled her, and with it a year of being small went out of her like water out of a cracked jug, and Verity Crane spoke to a duke's heir in a duke's chamber, as she had never once in her life dared speak to anyone set above her. "Take your hand off my arm, Mr. Sefton," She did not look at the valet. She looked at Lord Crispin, and her voice came out level, the wrist doing the work, the way her father had taught her to hold a scale. "You'll want it free, my lord, for the writing you'll set it to." "I beg your pardon," said Lord Crispin, all warm surprise. "A poisoner keeps no accounts of her poisoning." She stepped forward against Sefton's soft grip, and the grip, uncertain, gave. "She burns her proofs. She doesn't sit at a scrubbed table by one candle and write it all out plain and dated in her father's hand for a magistrate to read at his leisure. You've the wrong tale by the wrong end. And there's the one question in it you've never once answered. Not to his grace, and not to me, and not to yourself." The candle flames stood up straight in the still, hot room. Somewhere past the window a wood pigeon rolled on and on through the summer dusk. "You are diverting," Lord Crispin said, and smoothed his cuff. "I will grant you that. What question, Crane? Who holds the key?" The words fell into the room like a coin onto stone. The Duke, up off his pillows now, one wide mending hand braced on the counterpane, went very still and watched his brother. "The caddies kept locked," Verity said, and now she could not have stopped if the house had fallen. "His lordship's orders, on account of the physic being dear, and the maids light-fingered. The key hangs at the tea cupboard, and it's Mr. Sefton takes it down, and it's your own hands, my lord, that blend the leaf of an evening after the household's gone up. I never had the key by right. I never blended a grain. I only carried what was made up and handed to me at the foot of the stair. A magistrate will ask how a girl with no key put a leaf in a box she couldn't open, and then he'll ask who could. Enough. The honey had gone flat." Lord Crispin's beautiful face did not falter, but something moved behind it, quick, and was smoothed. "You have a shopkeeper's cleverness and a servant's insolence, and Thursday you will have neither. Sefton, hooves. They came up the drive out of the dusk, sharp on the gravel, a single horse ridden hard and reined in hard under the very windows, and every soul in the room heard them." Lord Crispin turned his head toward the glass. The Duke's eyes came up, and below, faint through 3 floors of the sleeping house, a great door was struck 3 times with the flat of a fist, and a voice that was used to being answered called out into the marble hall. "That will be nobody," said Lord Crispin. But he had gone to the window all the same, and the low red light lay across him as he looked down, and Verity saw his shoulders change. "It's a horse from the east, my lord," said Sefton softly. "Off the Magna Road. I can see the road it came by." Below, a second voice, "Mr. Harrows, thin with fright." And then the first voice again, rising, iron in it. An old man's iron that had sat a bench 40 years and would not be turned from a door. Verity's heart went up into her throat and stayed there, because she knew, before ever the name reached her, whose that iron was. "Wexmore." It called up the stairwell. "Where is the Duke? I'll see him tonight, or I'll know the reason. Julian Ravenscar, do you hear me? It's Aldous Frayne." For one whole heartbeat, nobody in the chamber moved. Then the Duke laughed, a low, cracked, astonished sound, the first true laugh Verity had heard from him in all her fortnight of dread, and let his head fall back against the cream pillows. "You sent for Thursday, Crispin," he said. "It seems the Lord has sent you Tuesday." Lord Crispin's hand closed on the window frame. "How?" he said, very quietly, and it was not a question to anyone in the room. It was a sum, worked aloud, and failing to come out. "I sent to Frayne Court this afternoon. My own note. My own man. Thursday, there is no earthly way, I sent Jem." Mrs. Pethick stood in the chamber doorway. Nobody had heard her climb. She stood square and dry and grey in the candlelight, with her keys in her 2 hands. And she was frightened. Verity could see the fright working in her. 30 years' place and nowhere on God's earth to go, and she had come up the great stair anyway, into the state chamber. Unbidden, uninvited, a housekeeper stood in a room she had no leave to enter. On the grey pony, before I'd time to be a coward about it. Mrs. Pethick said. When I saw your man walking my still room passage slow with his hands behind his back, my lord, I thought. Well, I thought a great many things I'll answer to the magistrate for, and not to you. Sir Aldous sat the bench with his late grace your father. He'll not have ridden 6 miles in the heat for nothing, and I'll not send him away hungry, so I'd best go down and see to a cold supper. She did not curtsy. Begging your pardon, my lord, I've said what I came to say. You have overstepped every. Let her by Crispin. The Duke's voice cut clean across it, and there was the whole of the old iron in it now. No June left under it at all. He was sitting fully up, the colour of a week's clean cups in his face, and for the first time in the fortnight he looked less like a man being emptied than like a man come to the end of his patience with the emptying. Let her by, and let Sefton loose my maid. And go down, all of you, and light the hall. My brother's guest has ridden a long way. It would be uncivil to receive Sir Aldous Frayne in the dark. They received him in the great hall, because the Duke would have it so, would have himself carried down in a chair by 2 footmen against Sefton's protests, and Ambrose's, who had been roused and came pink and blinking in his nightcap, would have the branch of candles lit on the long table and the tall doors set open to the warm dark, and the smell of the drying hay drifting in off the home meadows, sweet as a lie. Verity stood where a maid stands, by the wall, in the shadow of the great stair, and watched them set her Duke in his father's carved chair at the head of his own table, thin and upright, and she watched Sir Aldous Frayne come in off the gravel, with his riding crop still in his fist. He was a broad old man gone to iron grey, red in the face from the road, plain in a country gentleman's dark coat, and he had a magistrate's way of filling a doorway that was not unlike the Duke's own. He looked once round the hall, at the Duke in the chair, at Lord Crispin risen smooth and smiling to greet him, at the physician, at the frightened butler, at the maid against the wall, and Verity felt the look go over her and stop a half-second and move on, taking inventory, the way the whole house took inventory, but honestly. Julian, Sir Aldous crossed to the chair and took the Duke's offered hand in both his own, and his voice roughened. Good God, boy, they told me in the village you were sinking. You've the look of a man 3 parts into his grave. He caught himself. Forgive me, but your housekeeper's boy came white as milk and said a thing to me at my own door I'll not repeat in company until I've heard it from a mouth I trust. So, whose mouth is it to be? Sir Aldous. Lord Crispin stepped in, warm, gracious, a hand extended. You have had a wasted ride and a worse fright, and I am mortified that a servant of ours should have carried tales to a magistrate in the night. My brother is very ill, and his illness has made him fanciful. There is a wretched business here, I'll not deny it, but it is a household matter, a poisoning by a light-fingered still-room girl, who, I'll hear the Duke, said Sir Aldous. He said it without heat, the way a man says a thing that is simply true, and he did not take Lord Crispin's hand, and he pulled out a chair at the Duke's right, and sat in it, and set his crop on the table, and folded his big red hands, and looked at Julian Ravenscar and waited. And Lord Crispin's extended hand hung a moment in the candlelight, and then withdrew, and the smile stayed on his mouth and went nowhere near his eyes. Tell me plainly, said Sir Aldous. Plain or not at all, as your father used to say. My father used to say it. The Duke drew a breath. Then, plainly. For a fortnight and more I have been dying by inches under my own roof, and I could not tell why, and Ambrose here could not tell why, and I had begun in the small hours to believe there was a hand on the tap of me. A week ago the tap closed. I began to mend. Ambrose will swear to it. He called me a marvellous engine not 3 days since, and I could not tell why that was, either. Tonight I learned both whys at once. He turned his head. Crane! Come here! The whole hall turned to look at her. Verity came out from the shadow of the stair across the great flags with every eye upon her, and stopped at a respectful distance from the table, and folded her hands in her apron, and did not curtsy over much, because her father had taught her that a body who curtsies too low has already half confessed. This is my still-room maid, said the Duke. Verity Crane. A chemist's daughter, off Cheapside. For a se'ennight she has been quietly saving my life with a teapot, at the hazard of her own, and letting me thank her for fresher leaf. Ask her what she smelled in my tea. She will tell you plainer than any of us. Well, girl. Sir Aldous turned the iron-grey look on her, and it was hard, but it was not cruel, and it was the first time in a year a gentleman had looked at her, as though her answer would decide a thing. What did you smell? Foxglove, Sir Aldous. Her voice held. The purple bells off the hedges, that nod all along the Wexmoor lanes this month. Dried fine, and crumbled and folded through the good bohea, married to the doctor's honest cordial, so the one should hide and excuse the other. I've a chemist's nose. I caught it under the bergamot in June. I tasted a grain of it 7 nights past, off the tip of my little finger, the way my father taught me to taste a thing that mightn't be safe, and it bloomed bitter, and then it numbed my lip, and there's only the one leaf does that, and I could name it blindfold. Foxglove. The old man's brows drew down. A physic for the heart. A grain steadies a labouring heart, Sir Aldous. My father sold it so, careful, weighed to the scruple, and wrote the weight on the paper plain. A little more than a grain, day upon day, wearies that same heart past its mending. Slow, mild, in a way no country doctor thinks to question, for he's told the man's heart is failing, and here's the failing, right on the schedule he looked for. She lifted her chin a fraction. I stopped carrying it up. I brewed his grace clean leaf out of my own pot, with my own hand, and told him it was fresher, and he began to mend. That's the whole of the second why, Sir Aldous. He mended because the poison went out of his days the week I took the tap into my keeping. A silence held the hall. The candles guttered. Out in the dark the hay smell drifted, and a moth came blundering in at the open door, and beat itself against the branch of light, and nobody moved to send it off. That is a monstrous invention, Lord Crispin said, pleasantly, into the quiet. Sir Aldous, I am sorry to say the girl is clever, and she is frightened, and she is fighting for her neck, and she will say anything. The proof of her own hand is on the counterpane upstairs, a written confession, dated, in a chemist's fair script, hidden, when she thought discovery near, under my poor brother's very pillow. Sefton found the empty hollow behind her hearth an hour since. Ask her to deny she scraped a hiding place in the still-room fire. Ask her that. I'll not deny it, said Verity, before Sir Aldous could speak. I scraped it, and I hid the proof in it, and when I feared it, found I carried it up and put it under his Grace's pillow, because it was the one place in all this house I believed a gentleman would never stoop to search. She looked at Lord Crispin, full for the first time. I was wrong about that, my lord. You stooped. Something crossed the beautiful face. The first crack, hairline, quickly closed. Sir Aldous. The Duke leaned forward in his father's chair, and the effort of it showed, and he let it show. Weigh it as a magistrate weighs a thing. Here is a girl who, if she were the poisoner my brother paints, has behaved through the whole of it exactly backward. A poisoner does not write out her crime in a fair hand and reason it like a shop bill and date it. A poisoner does not, when her victim rallies, keep the proof of his rallying. She rejoices and destroys her leaf and lets him mend into a natural recovery that clears her. This girl did the opposite of every one of those things. She wrote it down. She kept the proof. She hazarded herself to stop it. And I am the plainest evidence in the room, for I am the man who was going into the ground a fortnight since, and is arguing with a magistrate tonight. Who mended me? Sir Aldous, if not the hand that closed the tap. Sir Aldous Frayne looked at the Duke a long moment. Then he turned in his chair, slow, and looked at Lord Crispin, and the honest old face was doing at last the very sum that Lord Crispin had spent a fortnight doing over other men's cups. Who blends the tea? Said Sir Aldous. Sir Aldous, it is a small question, my lord, and it wants a small answer. Who blends the Duke's tea? His man, said Lord Crispin. Sefton, under Ambrose's direction. It is a household, I blend it, Sir Aldous. Sefton had gone the colour of tallow. He stood by the wall with his soft valet's hands hanging at his sides, and his eyes went to his master and away, and back. I take the caddy down of an evening, and my lord adds the doctor's powder himself, for it's dear, and then I lock it and hang the key. That's the way of it. That's all I do. I only lock it. Be quiet, Sefton, said Lord Crispin. I only lock it and carry it, my lord. Sefton's voice had begun to shake. I never weighed a grain of anything into it. You weighed it. I never so much as. Be quiet. But the honey had cracked clean across now, and everyone in the hall had heard it crack, and Sir Aldous Frayne rose out of his chair with the unhurried weight of an old bench magistrate, and stood square on the flags of another man's hall, as though it were his own courtroom. I should like to see the caddy, he said. And the powder. And this written paper. And I should like Dr. Ambrose to tell me, on his oath as a physician, whether the cordial he prescribed for his Grace's heart was foxglove, or was not. For if it was, then a clever man might hide a great deal of foxglove inside a physician's honest foxglove, and no one the wiser. Well, Ambrose. The physician had gone from pink to grey. Digitalis, Sir Aldous, he said faintly. The cordial is. It is a preparation of the foxglove. Yes, in a very small and measured. It is a common physic for a failing heart. There is nothing irregular in the... There is everything irregular, said Sir Aldous heavily. In a physic that mends a man the very week his own maid takes over the making of it. You are either a rogue or a fool, sir, and for your sake I hope with all my heart you are a fool. And you will oblige me by not leaving this house tonight while I find out which. He turned. The caddy, if you please. And the paper. Send someone up. I'll go, said Mrs. Pethick from the doorway, and went, keys and all, before anyone could say her nay. Lord Crispin had not moved. He stood at the foot of his brother's table in the branch of candlelight, straight and handsome, and drawn as fine as a portrait, and the smile was quite gone now. And what was left in its place was the thing Verity had seen in the doorway a week since. The face of a man over a sum that has not come out, working out where the error lies. Only now he had found the error. The error was that a still room girl had smelled a leaf. You will regret this theatre, Julian, he said, very low, and the warmth was all burned off it. You will regret dragging our name across a country bench on the word of a Cheapside servant. When Frayne's zeal has cooled, and my leaf is lost among the honest physic, and there is nothing to be shown but an empty box and a hysterical maid, you will remember that I stood godfather to your debts, and you paid me with a magistrate in the night. I gave you the run of my estate, said the Duke. He did not raise his voice. He had never needed to. I gave you money when you asked, and never asked what for. I stood over your ruin 3 times, and never once counted the cost of you. And you sat by my bed each morning, and laid your hand upon my wrist, and told me I was looking a very great deal better, while your own fingers folded the leaf that was emptying me into the ground. His hand, wide and still, closed slowly on the arm of his father's chair. I would have given you the half of everything I have, Crispin, if you had only asked me one more time. You need not have poured me out by the spoonful to come at it. That is the part I cannot mend to. Not the leaf. That you would not simply ask. For a moment. One moment. Something that might have been the boy Lord Crispin had once been crossed the beautiful ruined face, and Verity, who had learned to read faces off a chemist's counter, thought she saw in it a real and ancient grief. The grief of the second son. The drawn one. The one they had all been fond of, and none of them had made their heir. And then it was gone, smoothed over, and there was only the sum again. Mrs. Pethick came down the stair with the brass caddy in her 2 hands, and the half-sheet of paper, and the spilled green twist folded back into it, and she set them on the long table in front of Sir Aldous Frayne. And the old magistrate opened the caddy in the candlelight and bent his iron-grey head and smelled it. Once, exactly as the Duke had, exactly as Verity had, and his face changed. "Bitter," he said. "Green," and under it, he wet his fingertip, the merest touch, and set it to his tongue, and waited, and Verity watched the numbness find his lip, and watched him know. He looked up. "I have shot over these hedges 60 years, my lord, and buried a hound that got at the foxglove in a wet spring, and I know the taste of it as well as your maid does. This is not a physician's measured grain. This is a garden of it." He set the caddy down with great care. "Sefton, you will come with me tonight, and you will tell me, at Frayne Court, in a room with a clerk and a candle, exactly whose hand added exactly what to this box, and you will do it before you have leisure to grow loyal again. And you, my lord," he turned, "and the whole weight of 40 years on the bench was in it, you will not leave Wexmore Hall. My men will be about the house by morning. I am not arresting a duke's brother on a maid's nose and an old man's tongue at 10 o'clock at night, whatever I privately believe. But there will be a physician out of London to test this leaf, and there will be a clerk, and there will be a reckoning that no amount of standing godfather to debts will smooth away. I have sat this county's bench too long to be dined into blindness, and I dined at your father's table when you were in short coats, and I tell you it will grieve me to the marrow to do what I am very much afraid I shall have to do." Lord Crispin looked at Sir Aldous Frayne, and at his brother in the carved chair, and at the brass box on the table, and last of all, a long, still, unreadable moment, at Verity Crane against the wall in her apron. And whatever he had meant to say, he did not say it. He inclined his head a fraction, the perfect drawing-room bow of a man leaving a party that has grown dull, and he turned and walked out of the great hall into the summer dark with his valet grey and trembling behind him, and the moth beat at the candles, and it was done. They took him from Wexmore before the week was out, quietly, in a closed chaise at dawn, for even a magistrate as honest as Sir Aldous Frayne saw no profit in a public spectacle of a ducal house, and the physician out of London had by then weighed and tested and sworn to the leaf, and Sefton had told his room with a candle everything, being a man who locked boxes, but had not the stomach to have folded the leaf himself. Ambrose proved, in the end, a fool and not a rogue, which spared him the worse of it and cost him every genteel patient in the county, and he removed to Bath by August and was not missed. Of Lord Crispin Ravenscar the county said, in the low voice one keeps for a hard frost, that his health required a long retirement abroad, and left it there, because that is what counties do with the sins of great houses. But Sir Aldous kept his clerk's papers, and the reckoning stood, and Verity understood that the beautiful drawn face would not be framed in any Wexmore doorway again. She learned most of it from Mrs. Pethick, in the still room, over the drying baskets, in the long gold evenings while the hay came in. "You'll not be carrying trays much longer," the housekeeper said one such evening, folding linen with her brisk, disbelieving hands, and would not meet Verity's eye when she said it. "His Grace has been asking Mr. Harrow a deal of questions about the wages of a still-room maid, and whether it's usual for a duke to raise them, and Mr. Harrow's been that flustered he poured the claret over his own thumb." A dry snort. "You mind yourself, girl, house talks." "Let it talk," said Verity, and was surprised to find she meant it. For the Duke of Wexmore mended into his full strength across that summer, and it was a strength worth the mending. By Lammas he was up, and riding the home farms at dawn again, broad-shouldered on a grey hunter, giving the tenants back a slack quarter's rent the year the drought had bitten. Never a word said of it above a whisper, and twice a day, still. Verity Crane carried his tea up the great stair, because he would have it from no other hand, and would drink it from no other pot but the small brown one that was hers. "You need not do it yourself, you know," he said to her one September morning, when the first coolness had come into the light and the roses on the south front had blown and gone. He was at the tall window in his shirt-sleeves, with the whole green park behind him, and he had waited for her. She knew he had waited, because the newspaper lay unopened. I have a great many servants. It is a strange thing for a duke to be brought his own tea by the one person in his house he cannot do without. It's no trouble, your grace. She set the tray on the table where the light was, level, the wrist doing the work. It is every kind of trouble. He turned from the window. Crane. Verity. I have been trying for a month to say a thing to you, and I have made speeches to my own shaving glass that would shame a schoolboy, and this morning I find I have no speech left. So, you must have it plain. Plain or not at all. He came a step nearer, and there was no wasting in him now, no grey, only a broad living man in the morning light, with something in his dark eyes she had first seen a week into his mending, and had been afraid, ever since, to look at directly. You saved my life with a teapot, and told me it was fresher leaf. You were more alone in this house than I have ever been in mine, and you carried the whole weight of it in an apron, and you never once asked me for a thing. Not thanks, not wages, not safety. I have known a great many people who wanted a great deal from me. I have never in my life known anyone who wanted nothing, and gave everything, and I find I cannot go back to not knowing it. I am asking you to stop bringing me my tea. Her heart had begun to go like the bees at the glass. Your Grace, I am asking you, he said, to let me bring you yours. For the rest of my life, in whatever pot you please. The still-room girl in her wanted to say the distance was too great, that his ring and her apron made a gulf no honest word could cross, that a duke did not, that a duke could not. But she had stopped being small in a candlelit chamber in July, and she found she could not learn it again. My father held, she said, and her voice was not quite steady, and she let it not be, that a man's trade should be written plain, or not at all, and that the same leaf that mends a heart in a grain will stop it in a scruple, and you must know your simples, or you'll do harm where you meant good. She looked up at him. You're a great deal of leaf, your grace. I'd want the weighing of you the rest of my life to be sure of the dose. The Duke of Wexmoor laughed, the low, cracked, astonished sound she had first startled out of him the night Sir Aldous rode up the drive, and it was the surest thing she had ever heard. Then weigh me, he said. Take your time. I have a great deal of it now, thanks to you, and I mean to spend the whole of it being weighed by the only person in England I trust to hold the scale level. He took her ink-stained hand in his wide, steady one, the working man's hand on the Duke's, the two of them no longer any distance apart at all. Marry me, Verity, and go on smelling my tea, for God's sake, for I find I have no nose for my own life without you. Outside, in the cooling gold of the first true autumn morning, a wood pigeon rolled its soft complaint through the limes, and the shears began again in the parterre. Snick, snick, and the whole great house that had once been so dangerous to her went on quietly about its living. And Verity Crane, chemist's daughter of Cheapside, who had climbed that stair twice a day for a year believing herself invisible, set her free hand over his where it held hers, level, patient, the wrist doing the work, and said the plainest word she knew. Yes. They were married from the little church at Wexmoor Magna, when the leaves were turning, quiet as he was in all his best doings, with old Sir Aldous Frayne, to give her away for want of a father and Mrs. Pethick weeping into the still-room linen she had brought to dab her eyes with out of long habit, and the tenants lined the lane with the last of the summer's flowers, because the Duke they had thought they were burying was walking out of the church in the sun with a maid on his arm, and there is no county on earth can resist a thing like that. Verity kept her still room. She would keep it always, she said, for a house should have one soul in it. Who knows what is in a cup by the smell of it? And she was not so grand yet that she would let another hand hang her lavender. And on a bright cold morning the following spring, with the hawthorn just breaking white along the hedges, where the foxglove would nod purple again, come June, the new Duchess of Wexmoor carried a tray up the great stair to her husband, not because she must, but because she liked to. Because the beeswax and warm dust smell of that landing had become the smell of the safest hour of her day, and she balanced it on the flat of her forearm the way her father had taught her to hold a scale, level, patient, and she knocked at the chamber door with one knuckle, and went in, and the tea smelled of nothing on God's earth but tea.